Is this crooked? Hello everyone and welcome back to the Plutonium Show. I've been away for all of last week because I just honestly didn't feel like making any content for YouTube. YouTube's not actually my full-time career. I was quite busy, so that probably had a lot to do with it. But I'm only saying this because there are a couple of things that we will be catching up on in today's episode. So, the agenda is the Martha Stewart snub, or rather, what, as the sugars are saying, is Martha Stewart threatened by Meghan Markle? We'll look at that, and if we have time, I would also like to address the entire Sydney Sweeney eugenics controversy. Never thought I'd be talking about something in relation to Sydney Sweeney on this channel, but again, if we have the time, we will do that before we finally get to reading your comments, my favorite part. The timestamps are all in the description box, by the way. I started doing that as of last week. So hopefully anything you're not interested in, you can just skip ahead. So last week we heard from Martha Stewart yet again. I don't believe this is the first time she's weighed in on the Meghan Markle copycat situation, but she didn't really have some kind words to say about her. Let's have a quick look at what she had to say.
What's it like to watch other celebrities, Gwyneth Paltrow, Meghan Markle, going in your footsteps and following something that you've really started?
Gwyneth's been very successful. She's created quite an interesting body of businesses. She won an Oscar, for heaven's sake, as an actress.
All right, I'm going to pause it here before she gets into the Meghan part, because there is something that came up in my research, in my readings, in relation to Gwyneth. I find it so interesting that now, as of 2025, Martha Stewart thinks that Gwyneth Paltrow is incredibly successful, which Goop is, by the way. I believe it's been valued at around $250 million as of 2020. I think. So yeah, that's nothing to sneeze at. And, the whole Oscar thing, which, we kind of know what the story behind that is, Harvey Weinstein. But regardless, she had only good things to say about Gwyneth in 2025. And why am I mentioning this specific year? Because, ladies and gentlemen, 11 years ago in 2014, I don't really know where Goop was in its trajectory at that point, but Martha had her attitude towards Gwyneth was, shall we say, a little less complimentary. She gave an interview to Porter magazine where she was asked about Gwyneth and Goop. I think, because unfortunately, the articles that I have found don't actually include the question that was posed to her. But this is what she had to say about Gwyneth Paltrow and Goop. Martha Stewart says Goop founder Gwyneth Paltrow should shut up and stick to acting. She needs to just be quiet. She's a movie star. If she were confident in her acting, she wouldn't be trying to be Martha Stewart. And this is according to Martha Stewart and what she told to Net-a-Porter's Porter, I suppose, magazine. So, yeah, a bit of a different tune, isn't it? All right, I just thought I would point that out. I didn't really come across anyone else who found this little discrepancy in her opinions about Gwyneth. Good to see she's come around, but I guess it's because there's a new kid on the block in the form of one Duchess of Sussex. So this is what she had to say about her.
Meghan, I don't really know very well, and I hope she knows what she's talking about. Authenticity to me is everything, and to be authentic and knowledgeable about your subject matter is extremely important.
Burn, and it was a very diplomatic, mild answer, but read between the lines. And it is quite, Meghan's going to need some burn cream. I think it was her birthday yesterday. Someone go and get her some burn cream to soothe that burn, because, where's the lie, right? I'm not going to lie. I have never watched Martha Stewart. She's literally the same age or maybe even older than my grandma. So not saying anything against, being of a certain age. I think it's incredible. Have you seen her Sports Illustrated cover at 81? In fact, in my research of, about her life, I came across the fact that she was a stunning model during her youth before she had her first child in 1965. I mean, have a look at these photos. Wow. But all this to say, she's absolutely right. In order to excel at anything, you're going to have to know what you're talking about. And if we've learned anything from With Love Meghan, it's that Meghan Markle has no idea what she's doing, may it be in the kitchen, whether it's arranging flowers or what have you. She's actually done herself an immense disservice, in my opinion, with that show. Now, as to the sugars who say, oh, Martha Stewart, the great Martha Stewart, is threatened by the likes of Meghan Markle. I mean, you could argue perhaps she was threatened by Gwyneth, and that's why she had bad things to say about her. But then she got used to the idea of, making more room for others who are, quote unquote, copying her. I think Goop is very different to what Martha Stewart is offering, actually. But one could make that argument, and now she's come around. But Meghan? I mean, what? It's not like she's going to replace Martha. It's not like Gwyneth replaced Martha. Like I said, Martha realized, okay, she's doing her own thing. She's gone into her own lane. But I had a quick look at Martha Stewart's achievements, and I have them all written down here, just highlights. So forgive me if I miss a few things. I just picked the most, I suppose, pertinent parts of her very illustrious and long career. First of all, she's a highly intelligent woman. Not only was she a straight A student in school, but she got a partial scholarship to, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, Barnard College in New York City. She, as I mentioned, was a stunning, well-paid model. She got into modeling to help pay for her expenses until she had her child. She then worked as a broker on Wall Street from 1967 until the recession hit in 1973. In 1976, she started her catering business in her basement, and at the same time managed a gourmet food store, which apparently thrived under her management. 10 years later, by 1986, her catering business became $1 million enterprise. And at the time, $1 million might not seem like much today. I mean, I still think it's impressive. I don't think I'll ever be $1 million enterprise myself. So it's not like it's not impressive in today's terms, but think about inflation and how impressive that was. And look, she had a bit of luck in the sense of her husband founded and ran a publishing house. And so what she did, her big break, according to my research, is that she would cater for a lot of publishing houses. And that's how she snagged a book deal. The book deal that arguably changed her life in 1982, which is when she published Martha Stewart's Entertaining. This book was groundbreaking. The world hadn't seen anything like it since, I believe, Julia Child from 20 years prior to that. And this was really the beginning for Martha Stewart. By 1990, she still isn't stopping. You see how different she is from Meghan. She started her own magazine, Martha Stewart Living. And then by 1993, she had her TV show, launched another magazine, this time focusing on weddings, and founded a company. Honestly, this woman was unstoppable. Even after getting convicted of misleading federal investigators and obstructing justice, she was under house arrest, I believe, for 5 months or so in 2004. Even that didn't rain on her parade. She came out of it, and while her business did suffer, there was a blow in terms of shares and just, her show was canceled. Anyone else, especially the likes of Meghan, would have crumbled, absolutely crumbled. But Martha came out even stronger than ever and hit the ground running, rebuilding her business. And, until she became the woman we know her as today. I believe at one point she was a billionaire, if she's not still a billionaire. And I'm not 100% sure on whether she is entirely a self-made woman, because as I said, her husband was in publishing, and you could argue she had, networks and a foot in the door in terms of getting that book deal. But this woman clearly is determined, highly intelligent, highly skilled, and is just brimming with perseverance. Someone who doesn't give up, and someone who's clearly talented. So it's just really insulting, actually, to anyone of Martha Stewart's ilk, a hard worker, for anyone to suggest that the likes of Meghan Markle are going to topple her off her little pedestal and take her place. Because I think we've all seen Meghan's had years now. And if you want to look at as ever, she's had the entire year so far. We're in August to prove, to show us what she's made of, and show us she did. And apart from all of this, there is one more thing, an integral quality, if you ask me, that can be found in successful people that Meghan Markle entirely lacks. And that is a sense of humor, which Martha Stewart certainly possesses. I mean, if you've seen her skits and her interactions with Snoop Dogg, not to mention her house arrest and how she's taken all of that in her stride and came out the other end, because that's what it takes. I personally don't believe that a lot of us can get through the hurdles life throws at us without a sense of humor. And not only is it good for your career and your mental well-being, but people love it. The audience love it when they see that someone has a sense of humor, doesn't take themselves too seriously. It's a show of humility, ironically, because you can sense the narcissism, in the likes of Martha Stewart and Gwyneth Paltrow. And I'm not saying that in the worst way, because I truly believe that in order to make it at that level, you're going to have to believe in your own hype, if that makes sense. Speaking of a sense of humor, I briefly wanted to touch upon Gwyneth Paltrow as well, because again, her career is not one that I followed keenly. I mean, her rise to fame was before my time, or I was a baby. And so I've always ever known her as Pepper Potts in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I loved her in that role. But it's clear to me from what little snippets I've seen of her throughout the years, she also possesses quite a wicked sense of humor. In fact, I recently saw the skit she made in relation to the whole Coldplay astronomer CEO affair that happened recently.
Astronomer has gotten a lot of questions over the last few days, and they wanted me to answer the most common ones. Yes, Astronomer is the best place to run Apache Airflow.
So again, people love that. But with Gwyneth, I still think, even though she is a very privileged Nepo baby, her parents were Hollywood heavy hitters in their own right. And one can argue, I've heard this being argued, that her acting chops aren't exactly top notch. But we can't deny that she created Goop in 2008 and took it from being a mere newsletter where she told people in her clients list, she recommended products, basically, what Meghan was trying to do with the TIG, into this huge empire. Whether you like it or not, I mean, there are many things that she said in relation to Goop that I just find ridiculous. But then as I researched that, it turns out she knows exactly what she's doing. Gwyneth isn't an airhead. And if you want to argue she is, which I don't think she is, then she's smart enough at least to listen to the savvy business people around her. Unlike one Meghan Markle. The thing about Goop is that despite the whole Martha Stewart comparisons that I'm sure Gwyneth was bombarded with all the way back in 2008 and onwards, it's actually quite quirky and original in its own way. I was a kid back then, correct me if I'm wrong, but she seems to have started the whole celebrity turned wellness guru thing. Blake Lively tried to copy her with Preserve and she failed. Meghan Markle went on board with the TIG. And so she started her own thing. Even in terms of the things she was recommending, things that are, wellness fads, I suppose, she did it first. things that have later become mainstream. Gwyneth did a lot of these things first. And what really impressed me about her is this, she went to Harvard Business School, I don't know why, in 2018, where students, she sat in the classroom at the teacher's desk and students were basically asking her questions. And one of the things that stood out to me is throughout the life of Goop, she'd realized early on the power of monetizing eyeballs. And before she yelled, vagina, 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 according to the reporter. But what she meant by that is she knew the things she was saying were controversial. She wouldn't describe it as clickbait, but controversial, because anytime you talk about a woman's vagina, people are gonna, imbue it with some kind of controversy. Let's be real here. And I'm not saying that it wasn't controversial, like those jade eggs she was pushing. But my point being is she knew exactly what she was doing. She knew that the controversy would lead to money. And she wasn't even pretending not to be aware of that strategy. She shared it with Harvard Business School students. And she also owned who she is. Meghan's trying so hard, and she did this with the TIG as well, trying so hard to come across as this really relatable, down-to-earth, California barefoot kind of gal, and we can see right through it. It's like Martha Stewart said, authenticity is everything. I haven't followed Martha's career, but from what clips I saw, looks like she's just being herself in her show. And she's not trying to push this image, this persona that we can all smell from 10 miles off. Smell its fakery. And the same can be said of Gwyneth. She is so unapologetically out of touch. She is so unapologetically elitist. She is so aloof. And when Harvard business students asked her about her price point, she literally said, look, I'm not trying to make, it takes money. These ingredients are expensive. And so the product is expensive. I'm not trying to make it an attainable thing. If you can afford it, by all means. If not, just look at the free content on my website. I really admire that straightforwardness and honesty. Again, I'm sure there are many controversies people are going to pull up and say, oh, how can you admire her? She did this and that and that. I didn't dig into her whole life story. Just based on what I've seen, she's got a sense of humor. She doesn't take herself too seriously, which I guess is connected. And she owns it. She's authentic in her out-of-touchness. I don't think Meghan will ever successfully break into any industry, let alone the homemaking lifestyle industry, because you really gotta be a personality to pull that off. Apart from the hard work, apart from the dedication. We know she is a lazy effing grifter. It has been 2 years now since the Spotify contract was canceled, and now look what happened. Lemonada, her podcast is basically being canned because it flopped. Her Netflix show barely cracked into 300 and something in the rankings. And it's not going to be renewed, of course. That's what happens when you lack all of the integral qualities we just covered now in these quick 20 minutes, because that's what it takes. If you're not made of that stuff, she's not going to replace anyone, least of all Martha Stewart. All right, so I did that fast enough to spare 5 minutes or so to the Sydney Sweeney controversy. Now, look, I am going to be completely honest with you. I'm not a fan of Sydney Sweeney, okay? She's not my cup of tea. I'm more of a Margaret Qualley kind of gal. I think I might be in love with her. Don't tell Zach. But point being, I never thought that I would be sitting here on my channel not only talking about Sydney Sweeney at all, I've never even watched anything she's in, but defending something she was a part of. So this is in relation to the American Eagle jeans ad. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this by now, but here's the specific portion of the ad that has triggered a whole eugenics/Nazism controversy.
Genes are passed down from parents to offspring, often determining traits like hair color, personality, and even eye color. My genes are blue.
Sydney Sweeney has virgins.
Is there something I'm missing here? Because upon first viewing, second viewing, third viewing, and fifth viewing of this ad, as much as I cannot stand the sex voice she is putting on, I fail to see the connection. How did we go from an overly sexed up blonde bombshell talking about her jeans being blue, literally, she is in blue jeans, to a eugenics / Nazism, white supremacist controversy? It eludes me, that connection eludes me so much, in fact, that I have wondered whether American Eagle themselves, because I don't know about American Eagle jeans, by the way, they're not really a thing in France. I don't believe they were a thing in Australia. It's not the first I'm hearing of the name, but you know, they're not exactly Levi's or Calvin Klein jeans. And so I started wondering, this is so left field that I started to doubt, or wonder rather, whether American Eagle planted the narrative themselves to stoke controversy. Either that, or some people, people will just, let's face it, see controversy in every little thing, no matter how innocent, no matter how innocuous, no matter how benign. What do they expect? Are they only meant to hire a person of color to utter those lines, to do this ad so that it's not seen as a white supremacist pushing agenda? Because look, I'm no Aryan myself. I don't have blue eyes. I don't have brown hair. In fact, I get this. When I was a kid in school, one of my teachers, we were studying about the Holocaust, and one of my teachers had actually mentioned that people who looked like her, she looked like me, and myself, and she pointed out a few of us, she said we wouldn't even exist today had Hitler been successful. And I'm not Jewish. It was purely based on my coloring. So if there was a controversy, then one would think that people who are not Aryan would see it too. But I don't see it. Do let me know if you think my theory of American Eagle planting this on purpose just to stoke controversy, because they got what they needed. Everyone and their dog and cat and parrot are talking about this and have been for the last week. It's also boosted Sydney Sweeney's profile, not that she needed any help boosting. American Eagle have responded, by the way, after a few days of silence. That's how you know this is strategy, man. They're building up interest. They have hit the jackpot with this ad. Make no mistake, as did Sydney Sweeney. I don't believe she's addressed it at all. But they've addressed it and said, this has always been about jeans, which I am inclined to agree with, unless, as I said, they knew exactly what they were doing. And this was masterminded by some person who probably needs to get a promotion if they haven't gotten one already. All right, on to my favorite part, finally. Member and subscriber comments. Starting off with, this was a very interesting one. That's why I want to start off with it. The whole Ford Explorer car story where Meghan has to, climb in through the trunk. Margaret Franson 2131 said the Ford Explorer story was based on an Alfa Romeo commercial that featured Catherine Zeta-Jones. Now, I'd never seen this ad, so I immediately got onto YouTube, and lo and behold, a beautiful Catherine Zeta-Jones is indeed climbing into her Alfa Romeo through the trunk. Now, whether Meghan actually based her story off this ad is unbeknownst to me. We actually don't know. But being Meghan Markle, I really wouldn't put it past her. Let me know what you think. It's the first time I've seen this ad. And my goodness, Catherine Zeta-Jones was a bombshell. Wow. I'm a straight woman, by the way. And first it's Margaret Qualley, then it's Catherine Zeta-Jones. I can appreciate female beauty and still remain straight. Not that there's anything wrong with not being straight. Like, the internet, the land of disclaimers. All right, next comment is from the Cringe de la Cringe video I made, where we critiqued Tina Brown's book, The Palace Papers. More videos are coming out. I've come up with quite a few topics out of that book, actually. I thought it was a lost cause, and I was like, oh, I'm going to get my money's worth. SD Vannon 1285, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, says they, as in Meghan and Harry, are a perfect match. She got international attention, money to spend, and a husband she could manipulate and control. He got a love-bombing enabler who took charge of him. Toxic enabling relationships like this do last, but as we have seen, they have enabled each other to sink to their lowest level. Trashy, little useful talent, and not enough intelligence between the two of them to make one decent person. You know, it's funny, people have been speculating apparently about how long their marriage will last, and it's outlasted anyone's predictions. A few people have guessed months at most, and now here they are, past their 7th wedding anniversary. But I've seen these types of relationships play out in real life. When you have the person, in Meghan in this case, who takes charge, and the other person is more than willing to let them take charge because of their own issues, then the relationship has the ability to last because there's no pushback. You know, what I found is people who come from maybe healthy upbringings or who have a healthy mindset in and of themselves, they have their limits. We have our limits. We're the ones who can't last in relationships with these abusive, controlling types because we don't stand for it. We fight back, we push back, and eventually the relationship ends. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if they actually ended up spending the rest of their miserable lives together. Next comment is also from the Cringe de la Cringe video. This is from Elvis Rose. This man was only ever considered a catch because his luck at birth gave him a prince title in the most famous royal family on the planet. However, it seems to me that the smart women decided that the perks of royalty were not worth marrying Harry, while Meghan knew it was the only way she'd become a household name. You know, it's funny. Years ago, when I had first joined the army, I remember, I think Harry had already retired by then, by the way, but we didn't know it. And I remember my mom partially joking, maybe she was serious, about how, oh my God, you know, you could run into Prince Harry if you get deployed. And even though I was a young kid at the time, 1920, I had immediately reacted viscerally, you know, not gutturally, with disgust. It's like, ew, yuck, no. And I was a kid. So I don't know if I instinctively knew he was, you know, a piece of work, or it may have even been as simple as he's so profoundly unattractive to me, just physically. But it's just funny, yeah. I mean, a kid in the army goes, yuck, no, no way. So of course, these aristocratic women have their standards. I mean, people would argue, some may argue that that's why he was able to score Meghan, because she clearly not only has no standards, but would do anything to elevate herself, even if it means degrading oneself in such a manner as to marry someone who clearly doesn't know how to treat women. I mean, I've heard rumors about Harry being nasty to women. He even mentioned in his book how he would bully or make fun of a teacher or someone at his school in Eton. But reading what I read in the Palace Papers, how he treated Cressida, I'm pretty sure he treated Chelsea Davy in the same manner, it's just unacceptable. And I found photographic evidence of him just storming off in front of her and leaving her to deal with the paparazzi, you know, kind of like that Justin Bieber clip where he gets out of a car and skates away from the paparazzi, leaving behind his wife, Hailey, to run after him, literally. It gave me those vibes. So yeah, of course. I mean, these aristocratic circles are small. People talk. I wouldn't be surprised if these girls were umming and ahhing, and then their parents were the ones who helped them solidify their decision to break up with him. You're too good for him. This man is a mess. And then finally, a question from the podcast 2 weeks ago, podcast 130, where we talked about, I don't like how I said that. Podcast 130. I ate up my words. Where we talked about whether Prince William should forgive Prince Harry. Forgive in the traditional sense of forgive and forget. Not forgive personally and move on, which I'm sure Prince William has to some extent done. But kiss and make up. Let's be best buddies again. Kirsten Anderson 1435 said, "The problem is Harry is not remorseful, nor does he believe he has done anything wrong. So you can't forgive someone who isn't seeking forgiveness. Harry wants back in with the royal family to exploit the connection. It would be a huge mistake to allow someone who is still bitter, jealous, and angry back into your life, simply because the mainstream media wants a redemption story. Prince William needs to focus on his own family and leave the troubled Harry behind." Need I add anything to this? I actually forgot to mention this whole aspect of he isn't even sorry. Has he even apologized that we know of? Meghan and Harry being the leakers that they are, I think we would have heard of it by now. That they've done the good thing and they've apologized, only to be met with deaf ears. Because, they love that victimhood narrative. We would have heard of it by now. These people are entitled. Harry has maintained for years that he and his wife in particular are owed an apology. Is that what he means by forgiveness? Look, I'm ready to forgive you, as in he's ready to forgive his family. I'm starting to think that's what this was all along. Because as far as we're aware, they have done nothing to deserve any of the backlash and defamation and disparagement that Harry and Meghan have subjected them to for years now. So, Prince William, absolutely. Focus on your beautiful family and just leave the mess behind. I mean, he's lucky. The trash took themselves out, effectively. All right, that's about all the time we have today. I hope you enjoyed this episode as ever. Do let me know. She's ruined a lot of phrases in life for me. Lens, organic, authentic, and now as ever. But do let me know what you think in the comments below. Your comments are integral to feed the content of this channel. I love responding to your comments. I am, metaphorically kicking myself over the fact that it's taken me so long to make this a regular thing. It is so good to interact with you on this level and to voice different opinions and to fill in the gaps in things that I perhaps have forgotten to mention. So keep them coming and have a great week ahead of you. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.